Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I have another battle report for you guys. This time it's Saurian Ancients against Saurian Ancients. So my opponent came up with a list, and I already had prepared this list to play against him. It's a little bit more of a fluff list or a fun list, I think, rather than a hardcore tournament list. It uses the models that I painted up in a week in a different video, and it mostly features just a lot of saurus warriors. Yeah, we'll just have a look through the list. So my list, once or twice I did a battle with a skink priest. Now I wanted to try out the Quatl Lord. He has Wizard Master, obviously. He has Grasp of the Immortal to get another +1 on his casting. And the Taurus or Engine of the Ancients can lower the casting values of a lore by 1. So effectively you have a +3 on casting, which is incredibly strong for the magic. But then I found that with magic normally you only get like 2 spells through each round anyway, so I don't know how valuable it actually is. So maybe divination is also not the lore to go for because the casting values are generally a bit higher, but yeah, I'm kind of undecided on this yet. And also in this setup I only have 4 spells on my Quatl Lord. You might need just this extra spell to make it really pop. In addition, I have 2 Saurian veterans. They both are mounted on carnosaurs. Carnosaurs, they have 4 attacks each with battle focus, offensive 3, but they do have alpha predators, so they do reroll the ones to hit. Which generally results in them inflicting like 3 hits. They have strength 6, and they have multiple wounds 2 against large. So they're quite nice pieces to get rid of large models in your opponent's army. The first one has Tyrannosaurus Figure and Shield Breaker, so in the end he goes to a 2-up armor save, 3-up in combat because of the paired weapons, with 5 attacks with AP 6, so that's really nice, I think. The other one has a lance instead with a shield and Basalt Infusion Duskforged, so he has a 2+ armor save with a reroll and a 3-up ward save against fire if I don't use the reroll. Yeah, otherwise we just have a lot of Saurian warriors. I chose Piranha because it's a really cheap upgrade to get fear all over. So basically with Saurian warriors you are kind of immune to fear already, but to take a steadfast check on discipline 7 instead of 8 still makes quite a difference, even though it's minimized. So that's one reason to go for it. The other is that of course you cause fear onto your opponent. And then we have 3 units of Skink Hunters with 1 Spearback, and we have 1 Towersaur with the Engine of the Ancients. My opponent's list was kind of similar. He also has a Quatl Lord. He instead has Warlord. I still have the Quatl Lord here, Alchemy and Pyromancy, but it was Pyromancy actually, so we had some unclarity about that, but it was Pyromancy. He has a Saurian Warlord with the Destiny's Call and the Glory of the Dawn Age. He wanted to try that out sometime. He has a big block of Saurian warriors with spears and serpent, so they go to agility 3, 4, and they have, I think they go to agility 3, and then with the spears they go to 5 if you charge them, or it's even 6 if they charge them. Anyway, they go to quite a high agility, and they have 5 an extra rank because of the serpent. Then he has some Skink Braves to fill out the core. He has Temple Guard to put the Quatl Lord in. He was gonna try this unit with the Quatl Lord. Then he has 2 units of 4 Rhampodon Riders with shields, just some Hunters, some Spearbacks, and the Taurosaur. And that is his list. So it is kind of a mirror match with just having 1 Taurosaur in each army, and for the rest just a lot of infantry. My opponent has the Rhampodon Riders. I have more Skink Warrior units. We were playing Frontline Clash and King of the Hill. My opponent chose the bottom table side, so I was forced to go on top. And I made my opponent deploy the first unit, so he deployed his Razordon, then some Rhampodons. Basically, both of us have quite a lot of kind of worthless units. Like I have the 3 units of Skink Hunters and a Razordon. My opponent has the 2 units of Rhampodons that are anyway going to be on the flanks most likely. and they still have Vanguard, and he has 2 rhampodons and a unit of skink hunters also. So we have plenty to put on the table without really dedicating any plan. The keen viewers amongst you might have noticed that I actually put down 4 units of Saurus Warriors, so this is a bit of a mistake. I should have actually 1 unit of Saurus Warriors less, but I didn't notice until just after the video, to be honest. So sorry for my opponent for having an extra unit of Saurus Warriors on the table. In a tournament this would never happen, because, well, then you just bring your tournament list, and now when we were setting up I was a little bit distracted, I guess. So anyway, we were playing King of the Hill. My opponent chose the forest for me to not have any units at the end of the game, and I chose the hill on the top right to not have any units of my opponent in. My opponent is deploying only the Skink Braves on the right, so that is the only unit he can contest the hill with. So I was planning to have my small unit of Sauruses and the big unit of Sauruses actually go towards the right side of the table to just completely deny my opponent any possibility of capturing the objective, whilst I, in this case, well, I had a unit too many. So probably the unit of Sauruses with the Slan. I would have just put the Slan in the 30 Sauruses. But let's look just at the game how we played it, because in hindsight it's kind of difficult to theory craft around this. So we start with the Vanguard deployment of my opponent, and then afterwards I only had a +2 on the roll to go first. So afterwards we still roll for first turn. My opponent tries to mind the fact that he might also be the one getting the first turn. One of the markers that the rhampodons put down is on the carnosaur with the dusk forged, so the right one behind the wall, and then the other marker is on the Saurus Warriors all the way on the right. Yeah, in the end I do get the first turn, so I do have an opportunity to just move up towards my opponent. Yeah, I just try to go as aggressive as possible, because I'm more combat focused. My opponent has pyromancy. He is going to put wounds on me over time. And yeah, I do have with the divination, I do have Portent of Doom and my hereditary as start of the game threatening spells, because Portent of Doom is just permanent, so you can stack it. So I can just cripple down the combat rest of my opponent and make his big units unusable in combat, basically. But the Temple Guard, they're not that much affected by it, because they still have Bodyguard. So that is a bit of an issue for me. I do realize right now that going into this matchup, I probably should anyway have just left 1 unit of Skinks with the Slan in the back, because the Skinks, they really vaporize to pyromancy magic, especially because they only have resilience 2, so your opponent wounds them even with fireballs just on 2+. They do have Scaly Skin 1 or innate armor of 1, and they do have a shield, or yeah, they do have a shield. So they do have a 5 bonus save, but even then, these units of just 5 wounds with resilience 2, they're not going to last really long against pyromancy magic. So it would have been probably better to just keep 1 of the units just in the backfield. And then that would account for the unit of Sauruses that I put down too many. Yeah, so I try to move up just kind of in between aggressive and cautiously. So the big unit of Sauruses started in the ruins, and I only moved up 4 inches because I didn't want to roll like 10 ones on a ruins dangerous terrain test and just lose 1/3 of my unit. So I just took it to get an extra turn of movement there. On the left, I try to set up a trap for my opponent if he fails the frenzy check on the rhampodons. And yeah, otherwise I just stay at a respectable distance, and I'm curious what my opponent is going to do. So my opponent in his turn, he basically just buys some time to get rid of the Skinks. Because the Skinks can still move up 12 inches, block my opponent's charges, set up charges the way I like them to get set up. and well, he just completely backs off because I didn't give him any holes in my deployment or any holes in my battle line to go with his rhampodons. And still the guy on the carnosaur and the pterosaur, if they charge in, then the rhampodons are just going to be toast. My opponent's magic phase sees him do quite some damage to the skinks, even though both units, I believe, they still stick around. So there's one skink, one or two skinks in the left unit, and there's going to be a remainder of one or two skinks in the right unit. So actually the pyromancy phase of my opponent didn't go as good as I thought it would go. Because I had expected both units just to be gone, realistically. So I definitely should have just kept back these kings a little bit more. But I'm also just trying to get a feel for the Saurian Ancients army, and I think it's a really nice army in the sense of how it plays, with these kings that are just still incredibly annoying. They have been incredibly annoying all the time and during Warhammer Fantasy, and they still are. With the just sturdiness of the blocks, and also a slight eliteness of your warriors. I mean, offensive, defensive 3 is kind of not that good. But you have parry. These guys have fear, all of them. You have strength 4, which is decent, and you have the alpha predators, so the reroll of 1s to hit, and 2 attacks per model. So you actually have quite a lot of offensive output out of these Saurian warriors blocks, and I think this is one of the armies where you can actually play a core spam quite effectively. And now I'm looking at my opponent's lines, and I'm like, okay, he didn't target the pterosaur with his rhampodons, so my pterosaur is kind of safe from them. He has a block of saurus warriors that can go into my pterosaur. I can still cast my magic, so I can get distracting off or no die enemy. No die enemy doesn't do that much, but yeah, I have a slam that can cast quite decently. Probably I can get, in the previous turn I got Portent of Doom off on my opponent's big block. Probably I can get it off another time, or I can get my scrying up. So I either have a hard target 1, or I have another Portent of Doom on my opponent. But anyway, I'm going to be able to put a minimized Guiding Light, minimized discipline on the pterosaur. So if I move up to that position, I'm going to be quite good in terms of the risks. So it's a 7 for my opponent to charge. So there's nearly a 50% chance that he will fail. If he fails, then he has to sacrifice another unit for the pterosaur, because if I charge in, then he's not going to be that happy about it. And then otherwise, yeah, if he charges in and he makes it, then his character basically has to do 2 wounds to me that multiply into 4, because otherwise I'm just gonna stick, likely. Because if you calculate it through, my opponent, he has 5 attacks. He hits me on 3+, but he only wounds me on 5+. So he's gonna hit like 4 times. He's gonna wound 1, maybe 2 times. If he wounds 2 times, then I'm a little bit in pain. But if he wounds 2 times, I still have an armor save left of 6+, so I might even make one. If I don't make any, I get 4 wounds on my pterosaur, and probably the unit finishes it. But they only have a total of, let me see, like 16, 19, 20 attacks that hit on 4+, with a reroll of the 1s, and that wound on 6s. So they might be able to chip in another wound. The pterosaur does, however, have 6 wounds, so on a full pterosaur it's gonna be tricky to just blow through in one go. And I was hoping that my opponent wouldn't be able to. And if he doesn't go through, then likely I will stick. Between the attacks that I have, between the Thunderstorm, my opponent already having 1 instance of Portent of Doom on his unit, and I wanted to try to get another instance of it on his unit. And and then I would most certainly stick, so I would be ready for a counter charge. I made one mistake there on the left, having I had a single skink left and I just misplaced it terribly, so I didn't have a charge with my sauruses into my opponent's flank. So that kind of counterweighs against the fact that I have an extra unit. Otherwise, on the right, my opponent charged on the marked unit of Saurus warriors. I decide to flee with that unit, and then I can rally later again and come back. This does make it so that my opponent has way more leeway on the right, so I'm not too happy about that. But yeah, I can still try to fix it probably. So we go to the combat, and my opponent actually gets off Flaming Swords, and I believe it was the one spell that I tried to dispel, but well, I didn't manage. So my opponent has +1 to wound, which is going to be quite terrible for me probably. But on the other hand, my skinks, they really go insane, doing 2 wounds to the unit. My Taurosaur does a total of 6 wounds to the unit, and then my opponent's Lord just fluffs by not hitting anything. So he only does 1 wound to my Taurosaur in the end, so I actually win combat and my opponent has to roll a break test. So that was really incredible for me. And then in my turn, I only charged in with one of the Carnosaur guys. I probably should have charged in with just the 2 of them, just to make sure that I would break through. Possibly that's a little spoiler for what's coming up. But I kind of underestimated, once again, I tend to do this sometimes. I underestimated the potential of how well Sauron warriors are at sticking around. So I would only have to kill 10 more Saurus warriors to break a steadfast in that combat, and then I have a rank. He only has 1 rank, so he won't be steadfast anymore. But I charge in with a character that is going to be challenged out by his warlord. Yeah, and the rest is kind of obvious probably. I mean, I'm not going to get 10 wounds with just a single Taurosaur. Or I should not hope to achieve that. I don't have an overrun available in the flank because my opponent jaffed up my unit pretty decently. I decide to just charge in the skink hunters that my opponent supplied me with in the previous turn, and the second Carnosaur is just now standing in the middle of the field, and I thought I had a better use for him. I wanted to get him over to the right to take care of these King Braves at some point, but it was just a terrible idea. I should have just gone through to try to go through the Saurus warriors in one clean go, because, well, I mean, if it sticks around there, then my entire battle plan is gonna be different from what it is going to be. So in terms of magic, I do get up scrying, I believe, from divination as a bubble from the Taurosaur, because I have symbiosis. I can cast it through. We already did the combat there, and as you can see, my opponent just stuck. And now we go to a funny situation where my opponent is going to charge in on my sauruses, and I believe we were a little bit confused with the charge rules and the overrun rules, because in overruns you don't, you can ignore the footprint of your own units, but we played it as if in a combined charge you can also ignore the footprint of your own unit. So meaning to say that if the Saurus warrior block or the Temple Guard block, if they charge into my Saurus warriors, my opponent can then also charge in with the Taurosaur that's behind it. Yeah, I checked on the forum also just to ask what people's opinion was about that, and they said that that's actually not possible, so that was a bit of a mistake from us. But every battle you learn again, right? This is also why you play just casual battles, in order to to be more aware of the rules for tournaments. Yeah, so the situation would definitely have been more different if my opponent had not been able to charge in the Stegodon into my Saurus warriors. I would like to have your opinion on what could have been possible there. Do you think the Temple Guard and the Stegodon would have been able to charge into these Saurus warriors that now fled or not? Because it would be nice to know. Just as a redirecting charge, my opponent declares obviously the Temple Guard into the side of my character, the flank of my character. The Taurosaur, he redirected his charge onto the skink that's on the left, so the skink fled away. He has a Razordon that can charge my Saurus warriors, so they have to flee again, and then the rhampodons, they charge once again to make my Sauruses flee again even further. So I think this is like the most movement that these Sauruses have ever done and will ever do in any game, probably. Yeah, and otherwise, yeah, this is a bit of a situation that's less fortunate for me. I mean, my Stegodon is still fighting up against a character that still has a spear that has multiple wounds too, with 5 attack, strength 5. It's not really that great. And my Carnosaur mounted dude is charged in the flank by a big unit of Temple Guard. So likely that's gonna break. I was waiting for my opponent to cast Flaming Swords, and that would be the only spell that I would want to dispel. My character is currently in a duel with my opponent's Warlord, so if my opponent's Warlord gets Flaming Attacks and +1 to wound, and the +1 to wound is not that big, I think. The Flaming Attacks is a bit of a bigger deal because then it triggers my Basalt Infusion and I might actually survive this combat. I don't want to survive this combat with this with Carnosaur mounted character, because if there's a scenario where my Taurosaur would survive, which would kind of also make sense, but in the end he didn't. But if he survived, then I would want my opponent to kill my Carnosaur so that his unit of Temple Guard drops out of combat, and then he can only get the combat rest for dealing the wounds and not for the banner, the flank, the 3 ranks, the BSB, the big flank, and the charge. So that would make a big difference because then my opponent still has Portent Mondum on him. If my Stegodon survived, I could have just even won the combat, broken him, and freed up the field there. So that would have been the ideal scenario. It unfortunately didn't happen. So I'm now going to flee, and the Temple Guard, they pursue my hero on Carnosaur. I was hoping with the hero only having suffered 1 wound that he would just outrun the Temple Guard. Unfortunately, the Temple Guard caught me, and now we end up in a bit of a weird scenario where the Temple Guard, when they start their pursue move, they are with the front rank, or with the front facing in the flank of my Carnosaur. So then we turn the Temple Guard, they go into the flank of my Carnosaur. I doubt whether we would have been able to maximize it as much as we did, but well, that's just a detail. Yeah, otherwise it's looking suddenly quite nice for my opponent, through some screw-ups that I did, I think. Yeah, so I only have my Sauruses left now, and yeah, my big beasties are dying quite quickly. My opponent charged in with the Skink Braves on the right to my Razordon. He had to stand and shoot, and then in combat we just munched at each other. I think this was a bit of a bad play by my opponent because his objective there was to just secure the hill with his scoring units, and I was more than happy to get an opportunity at dishing it out in combat. And on my turn I get a rear charge on his Temple Guard and a front charge on his unit of Sauruses. So I was hoping to break his unit of Sauruses, even though they strike first now, and they have a higher AP than me, and they don't really care about fear. But I get back kind of a similar amount of attacks. I only do 3 wounds, and my opponent does 4 wounds. So he loses by 1, I believe, because of Portent of Doom. He sticks around, and I'm looking at a Stegodon or a Taurosaur that's probably gonna charge my unit. Then we go to the other unit with the Temple Guard. So the Temple Guard, they dish out against my Carnosaur. I issue a duel, but my opponent doesn't accept, so I'm really sad about that. I do manage to kill the champion of my opponent, and the Carnosaur, I believe it was not this turn, maybe? I think it was this turn. I got 4 6s for the hit rolls for the Carnosaur, and the Carnosaur has battle focus himself, so he got 8 hits with strength 6. That was quite an insane moment. Yeah, that was a really lucky dice roll. So I survived the onslaught that the Temple Guard were bringing onto me. It's a total of like 16 strength 6 attacks with AP2. This model has the Taurosaurus figure, so I only have a 3 up armor save that becomes a 5 up armor save in combat. So logically, my model should have sustained quite some damage. Even though I do have scrying up, and I have the defense of my character on the Carnosaur, so I have defensive 5. So my opponent only hits me on 5s. But he had some good hit rolls, and then he had some really bad 2 wound rolls. And my opponent then, he charges in onto my Saurus warriors, and he with the Taurosaur, and he's gonna go through. The rhampodons, they come closer. I think at this point we both are not that sure what's gonna happen with the Temple Guard. I mean, I have a unit in his rear, so he cannot adjust his facing. I still have a unit in his rear, so I do get some combat rest from that. As long as the Carnosaur is going to stay alive, I'm quite fine in that situation, and the Carnosaur is just going to chip away at his Temple Guard. But meanwhile, his Temple Guard should definitely just remove my Carnosaur from the field, to be honest. We do another round of combat here, and I grind down more Temple Guard. Yeah, it's just a grind, basically. That's the thing with Temple Guard. You just have to kill them down to the man or remove the character. Well, you can't really access the Slan, so that's not really an option. And also, if the Slan refuses a duel, then nobody really cares. So you don't lose bodyguard on the unit if he's in Temple Guard. I believe in Saurus Warriors you do, but anyway, they don't have bodyguard with the Slan in there. So yeah, my turn. I flank charge with a unit of Saurus Warriors. My Slan and his unit of Saurus Warriors just standing there like he doesn't know what he has to do. Yeah, at this point it kind of looks like a draw because yeah, we also counted out the points after this turn. In the end, I do manage to kill his Temple Guard to the last man, so he's not steadfast anymore, or he's not stubborn anymore. And I managed to pick up those points. But in the end, we calculated out, and it's a difference of 140 points. That's clearly a draw. We both don't have the objective. I'm not going to go on the objective because the Taurosaur is going to just kill my unit. So it's a nice draw for the Saurian Ancients. Yeah. After game thought, yeah, I probably shouldn't have deployed an extra unit of Saurus Warriors, so apologies for that. I think it's a nice army to play with. I think Divination feels kind of good with the Saurus Warriors, because no enemy is good. Scrying is good. Portent of Doom is useful against single models and then just Death Stars. Bodyguard is just annoying to deal with, but that's always the case. But just the grinding potential of these Saurus Warriors is really up there. I still need to learn how to play with a Taurosaur, because this was evidently not the way. But yeah, for now I'm quite happy with the list, even though it is still tempting to instead go for a Skink Priest on a Palanquin and just add in another Warlord with Glory of the Dawn Age instead of the Slan. But yeah, we'll see next time what happens. Thank you for watching.